The dollar bill felt crisp between Sarah's fingers as she pressed it into the janitor's calloused hand, barely making eye contact. She was already mentally reviewing her presentation for the board meeting, her mind 1,000 miles away from the man scrubbing floors in the lobby of her daughter's private school. He mumbled something, a thank you, perhaps, but Sarah was already turning away, her designer heels clicking purposefully across the marble floor. She didn't know it yet, but that single dollar would haunt her for the rest of her life. Not because it was too little, though it was. But because 20 minutes later, that same janitor would be cradling her unconscious daughter in his arms, his shirt soaked with Emma's blood, his voice hoarse from screaming for help, ***. Sarah Chen had built her life on control. As a senior executive at a tech firm in downtown Boston, she orchestrated million-dollar deals before breakfast and navigated boardroom politics with the precision of a chess master. Her daughter Emma, 8 years old with her father's dark eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin, attended the prestigious Meadowbrook Academy, a school where tuition cost more than most people's annual salary. Sarah told herself she was giving Emma every advantage she'd never had growing up in a cramped apartment in Chinatown, where her immigrant parents had worked 3 jobs between them just to keep the lights on. But success had a price. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she'd made it to one of Emma's soccer games. The school's parent portal was filled with missed notifications about field trips and bake sales. That morning, she'd been running late, again, when she'd nearly collided with Marcus Rivera, the school's day janitor, as he buffed the lobby floors. Marcus had stepped aside quickly, his eyes downcast, apologizing though the near collision had been entirely Sarah's fault. She'd felt a flash of irritation, why was he cleaning during drop-off anyway, before remembering her therapist's advice about random acts of kindness. The dollar tip had been an impulse, a way to check off her good deed for the day before diving back into the relentless current of her schedule. She'd noticed, vaguely, that Marcus was younger than most janitors, probably mid-30s, with tired eyes and shoulders that seemed to carry an invisible weight. His name tag was slightly crooked. These details registered dimly before being swept away by her mounting work concerns. Marcus watched Sarah disappear through the front doors, then looked down at the crumpled dollar in his hand. He'd wanted to refuse it, he wasn't a charity case, but pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. The dollar would buy a few more diapers for his daughter, Sophia, who was staying with his mother while he worked double shifts. Since his wife Rosa's death from cancer 18 months ago, every penny counted. The medical bills had swallowed their savings, his dignity, his dreams of finishing his engineering degree. He pocketed the dollar and pushed his cleaning cart toward the east wing, where the afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The hallways were emptying as students filed into classrooms. Marcus had just started mopping near the stairwell when he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze. A child's scream, abruptly cut off. He abandoned his cart and ran, his worn sneakers skidding on the polished floor. The scream had come from the second-floor landing. Marcus took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. What he found there would replay in his nightmares for years to come. Emma Chen lay motionless at the bottom of a short flight of stairs, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood pooled beneath her head, stark against the cream-colored marble. Her backpack had burst open, scattering books and pencils like broken promises. Above, on the landing, her shoelace dangled untied, the culprit in this sudden catastrophe. Marcus didn't hesitate. His first aid training from his Army Reserve days kicked in with crystal clarity. He checked Emma's breathing, shallow but present. Her pulse was weak. The head wound was bleeding profusely, as head wounds do, looking worse than it might actually be. But he couldn't be sure. Any head injury in a child was serious. "Call 911, he shouted to a teacher who'd appeared, frozen in shock. "Now!" Marcus carefully stabilized Emma's neck and head, using his own body as a brace, terrified to move her but knowing he had to stop the bleeding. He stripped off his work shirt, pressing it gently but firmly against the wound. Emma's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and frightened. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm Marcus. You're going to be okay," he said, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "Don't move, okay? Help is coming. I need you to stay very still for me." "My mom," Emma whispered, tears mixing with blood. "We're calling her right now." "You're so brave. Just keep looking at me." Time became elastic. Marcus later couldn't say if he'd held Emma for 3 minutes or 30 before the paramedics arrived. He maintained pressure on the wound, monitored her breathing, kept her conscious by asking gentle questions about her favorite color, her pet hamster, anything to keep her anchored to consciousness. His knees ached from kneeling on the hard floor. His arms trembled from holding the same position. None of it mattered. Sarah was in her car, halfway to the office, when her phone exploded with calls. The school. The hospital. A number she didn't recognize. Her hands shook so violently she nearly crashed, pulling over. The words came at her in fragments: Emma, fell, head injury, ambulance, Massachusetts General Hospital. The drive to the hospital existed in her memory only as a blur of horns and tears and prayers to a God she'd stopped believing in years ago. She abandoned her car in a loading zone and sprinted through the emergency room doors, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Emma Chen," she gasped at the desk. "My daughter. 8 years old. They brought her in." "She's in surgery," the nurse said gently, pointing toward the waiting area. "The doctor will update you soon. But you should know, the man who found her saved her life." He kept pressure on the wound and kept her calm until the paramedics arrived. The EMTs said another few minutes of blood loss. The nurse didn't finish. She didn't have to. Sarah stumbled to the waiting room, and that's when she saw him. Marcus sat hunched in a plastic chair, his work pants still on but his torso covered only by a thin undershirt. His hands and arms were streaked with dried blood, Emma's blood. Her daughter's blood on his skin, under his fingernails, soaked into the shirt that lay crumpled in a biohazard bag beside him. Their eyes met, and Sarah felt the earth tilt beneath her feet. Recognition crashed over her like a wave. The janitor. The man she'd given $1 to, barely looking at his face. The man who'd apologized for existing in her path just hours ago. This man had held her daughter's life in his hands. Sarah crossed the waiting room in 4 strides and did something that would have been unthinkable to her that morning. She dropped to her knees in front of Marcus and took his blood-stained hands in hers. "You saved her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved my Emma." Marcus's carefully maintained composure crumbled. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Sarah said fiercely. "Not anyone. You. You saw her. You ran to her. You stayed with her. You." The words caught in her throat, strangled by shame and gratitude and horror at how close she'd come to losing everything. They sat together in that sterile waiting room, this executive and this janitor, connected by blood and fear and hope. Marcus told her about Sophia, about Rosa, about the dreams he'd deferred. Sarah told him about her own parents, about the life she'd built to escape poverty, about the daughter she loved but had somehow lost sight of in the pursuit of success. When the surgeon finally emerged, his face was kind but tired. Emma would recover. The skull fracture was serious but manageable. No brain damage. She'd been incredibly lucky, the rapid response and proper first aid had made all the difference. Someone who knew what they were doing helped her immediately, the surgeon said. That quick action saved her life, no question. Sarah looked at Marcus, still sitting there in his blood-soaked undershirt, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. The story could end there, with Emma's recovery and Sarah's gratitude. But it didn't. Sarah took a leave of absence from work, spending 3 weeks by Emma's bedside, relearning her daughter's favorite foods and fears and dreams. And when she returned, she called Marcus into her office, because she'd done some research and